The journey started in 2011. I felt God calling me to do two specific things that year, and the first one was to write and record an original worship album. The second was to go to Africa and lead worship at several women's conferences out there. So when I first heard this news from God, I kind of argued for a bit. I didn't want to be put in two uncomfortable situations in 1 year. It was a lot. I didn't know how I was going to pay for both of these things. I didn't know who was going to be around to help me, what people were going to be there, and I was really scared. But the more that I prayed about it, the more I really felt an urgency, really, and a calling from God to do both of these things simultaneously at the same time in the same year. And so that's kind of where it all started. So as I began planning for my album, for my trip to Africa, I essentially was looking at them as two separate things. On one side, I was planning my album, I was writing songs, I was getting the people in place ready to do it, going through the production process. And on the other side, I was planning my trip to Africa. So I was having all these team meetings, I was trying to raise money for the trip, and we were planning conferences that we were going to do out there. So as time passed, it was interesting because the album and the trip to Africa, they started to merge. Africa began to support my album began to support Africa, and it was just this amazing thing that started to happen that God was orchestrating. And I began to write songs even thinking of the women in Africa. What did they need to hear? What were they going through? How could I write lyrics that would be perfect for what they're going through? And so it was a really amazing time when these things started to merge together. One of my favorite moments was at one of our Africa team meetings. We were all meeting together, and my team leader announced what our theme verse was going to be for our conferences. It was Psalm 51:10, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." And at that exact moment when she said that, I realized that I had written a song off that exact verse about 3 days prior to that meeting. And it was at that moment I told my team about it, and we were all kind of taken aback by what God was orchestrating at that time. And after that moment, one God moment after the next started to happen, and God provided the finances for both the projects. I had all the money that I needed to get everything done and to go on the trip. All the people were in place that I needed to get the projects done and to go to Africa, and I could go on. God really provided in every single way, and it really blew my mind how He was orchestrating everything. It was really cool to be a part of. So after much prayer and planning, I decided to take an EP of 3 songs over across the world with me to Africa. And 2 of those 3 songs, Heart After You and Renew Us, I introduced at the conferences that we did out there. Heart After You was the song that was based off of Psalm 51:10, and it pretty much became our theme verse for the conferences. And Renew Us was a song that was specifically for the women that came broken and came empty and needed renewal from God. One of my favorite stories from Africa was actually when we did a conference one Saturday at a community center in Johannesburg. And after the conference was over, I gave out my EPs to several of the women that were there. And later that week, we went back to the community center to visit them and see the women that we had ministered to at this conference. And as we started to drive up to this conference, this community center, we started to hear some music that was playing very loudly. And the closer that we got, we started to realize that they were actually playing the songs off of my EP during their lunch hour. And it was just a really cool moment for me. It was at that moment that I realized that God was using this music beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. It was bigger than me. It was bigger than my unsure beginnings and my inhibitions that I had about starting the project and going on the trip. God truly made a beautiful moment out of dust and out of my dust. And my prayer is that He continues to create beautiful moments through these songs, moments of renewal, moments of victory and transparency, moments of hope and love. And through these moments, hopefully, our hearts will become a little more like God's own heart.